Hello and welcome to an exciting tech demonstration from Connor. I'm going to take you a quick run through of how we built the audio visualization thing. So this is just a solo project here. There is nothing to see in the viewport of this VP, and that's because everything is spawned at runtime based on an audio file. So on construct, essentially all I'm doing here is I'm setting up some variables which I'm going to need later. We're taking in a set of columns and rows. That's how many blocks there are that are going to be spawned for the audio thing, and we're using that to determine a maximum number of allowed blocks, as well as populate an array that will essentially be the indices for the last row. And the reason for that is whenever we are a ways into the song and we're spawning and we're overflowing our maximum, these are the ones that need to be removed. So we're just kind of saving these for later. We're recording the duration of the song, and then we're setting up the song for us to work with. Over in the event graph, coming in on begin play, we are choosing which mesh we want based on whether or not the user has decided to use tunnel mode or not. That's exposed there as a Boolean that they can work with. That essentially chooses between the flat method and the sort of cylindrical method, and we're choosing two different meshes based on that. The reason for that is that we don't need a bottom to those boxes if we're in the flat mode, because it's going to be inside the ground. And then we have the bottom if we're in the tube one. Those two meshes actually also have two different material instances, but we'll get into that in a minute. Over here we got used in tunnel mode to calculate loop. Essentially this is taking which column we're in, and then it's sending that information over into a material parameter collection so we can use it later. Then we've got spacing, which is likewise used by the material to sort of separate out the blocks. All of the positioning work is actually done in the material. It's not in the CPU, in the interest of sort of keeping as much of the load on the GPU as possible, because it's quite CPU heavy. Here's where the audio is played, and then at each sample we're updating the duration value so that we know how far into the song we are. That's at playing the audio. And then finally, every time we hit an audio interval, so that's every time we want to update the blocks, we are triggering this event. So let's come on down here. And then for each of the blocks in a column, we are adding an instance, and we are sampling an audio file and using that to set the scale Z. So we're taking in the audio frequency notch. That's what frequency band we're interested in. And then we are using our sound file and how far along we are, and then setting that out as the scale of the object. Once we got that, we set the custom data on it. The material needs to know what row we're in, as well as what column we're in, and for it to be able to position anything. And so that's the information being sent over there. And then at the end of a line, so this is at the end of an update, we are moving all of the rows back one. That's how we get our animation. We're moving everything up one space, and then we're deleting that last one if we're past the max. So there's that cull list I mentioned coming in there. Alrighty. Over in the material, which I will just grab, just get it from that. Now this might look complicated, but it's not too bad really. Here's that custom data we were sending over, where I mentioned we were sending over rows and columns. We're sending them into these named reroutes, because regardless of whether we're in flat mode or if we're in tunnel mode, that's the cylindrical one, we're going to need that information. This is going to be going into the world position offset in a minute, and this static switch parameter is choosing whether we're in tunnel or flat mode. All that the game does to choose which one we're using is whenever we swapped out those meshes earlier up here, one of those meshes has the tunnel mode and one of them has the flat mode. So it's automatically using the right version of these. It's just done through a material instance. If we're in flat mode, it's pretty straightforward. All we need to do is take the row, the spacing, and the column, and then space out in a grid. That's literally it. There's not much more fanciness than that. The only fancy bit here is that we're taking the row count that is set up in the blueprint, which is how many rows we have created in total since the beginning of the song, and then subtracting that from the current row number, it knows how far away from the origin we should be at this time. So that's that. Up here, we got tunnel mode, which is a little bit more complicated. We are still using that same information. We're still taking our row information, our column information, and our spacing, except this time we are wrapping them into a circle using a cosine and a sine, and then dividing by 2 pi there to get a like a rotary, a position in a circle. We orient all of those blocks then away from the center using a simple rotate about axis, and then obviously we know how far around the circle are by what row we're in. And then there's a bit of height offset, because otherwise the tube is going to be halfway through the ground, and that's that. The only real odd thing I had to do here is I had to widen out the bounding boxes on the meshes, because otherwise they will move out of their own bounds, because we're using quite a lot of well-positioned offset, and they'll get clipped out. The coloring is all done procedurally as well. We're taking we're sort of creating a gradient on the mesh based on its pre-skinned local position. So that's taking the scale and so forth here, going through a vertex interpolator. And then we're also sampling a color curve. So I wanted a nice like sort of color temperature curve, and so I drew one in here so we can get that sort of nice hot-cold situation. And we're just sampling that based on essentially the volume of the note, if you think of it that way. And that just goes out to our emissive. That is essentially it. If you have queries, feel free to ask, but that is the entire system. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was informative.